during the year, he and I visited on a handful of occasions. We're talking about Davis Webb. He's extremely talented. With regards to play calling, it's something that, I think he'll be really good at it. And I know that's like, man, are you going to give up play calling? And I would only do that if I felt like it would help our team. I'll still be involved with what we do offensively, just like what we do defensively. But I do think he has a gift. I think he's real sharp. I'm glad he's on our staff. Typically, any decision we make like that is to benefit our team. So I'm looking forward to it. I challenged him in the offseason prior to that preseason game. He did a good job. But I think it'll help us, and certainly I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was going to help our team win. You get to a point where you're focused strictly on improving your team any way you can.
Was that tough?
Yeah, he's gonna call. Well, I know Brandon Bean announced it earlier in the media, so I saw him in the hallways. I thought, well, you can come on and do my presser too. But no, I'm excited for him having that opportunity.
Was that difficult?
No. Listen, I'm going to have opinions with plays. Mine will be the bad ones. His will be all the good ones. But I want to support him in that. I can recall being in that situation. Even in Dallas, 2 or 3 years there, I don't know that anyone knew who was calling plays. It was Bill, myself. But I think that stepping back and looking at it, I think he'll do a fantastic job. And go ahead. Well, a lot of it is, look, you go through the minute the season ends, you have a number of coaches interviewing for other jobs. You have coaches that you definitely want to retain, and it's never going to be quite on your timeline. If I love, and it's great to see Declan advancing, but it wasn't on my timeline. In other words, it just happens faster. So I remember there was a point during the year where he and I visited. I'm talking about Davis, and it was relative to the position he has, but also more than just having the position, being someone that would have more input and be able to call plays. It's still going to be our offense, but I think it's easier to do as you get older, and you look at how do we win more games. I've done it before. Sometimes you feel like you're used to carrying something in a hand, so your hands feel empty when you're not doing that. But Pete, the first time it ever happened was because of an injury I had, and we played Sunday Night Football against the Colts, and we scored 63 points. And I'm like, Pete, you're killing me. I think it's going to help our team, and I'll do everything I can to support them. And it's something that I wouldn't do if I didn't think would help.
Hey, it's Moose here from the Broncos Breakdown. We're going to get right back to head coach Sean Payton here at the NFL Scouting Combine. But a quick little reminder for you, Broncos country, to subscribe to the channel. We've got boots on the ground all week at the Combine, but it's not just that. You're going to get free daily videos all off season long, including free agency, the draft, the Combine, and so much more. It's interactive, it's entertaining, and more importantly, it is for you. So subscribe to the Broncos Breakdown. Let's get back to Sean Payton.
When did you kind of first? Was it enticement to keep him here? Because
well, I think he was wanting to stay. Look, he interviewed at a few spots, and I think that opportunity is going to come for him, to be a head coach. I don't know that this was, well, I'm staying if I get to do this. I don't think that was the case. I think, I don't think he was going to. Well, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he really likes what he's begun to do here with us and the start of working with a young quarterback. It's hard to leave that. So I don't think it was something I was already moving towards before anyone had even discussed it. It was mid-season.
When you say you were already kind of moving towards that,
Yeah.
when did you first get there? What kind of self-reflection? Was it a look at the offense?
No, it wasn't that. Because, look, we finished 10th this year, and we had a good team. There's certainly things that we want to be better at. But it's also being quicker. And, look, it's only if there's someone that you feel like is good enough to do that, and he'll have that opportunity. And like I said, having done this before, I can recall how it was, and I'm sure there's going to be times where I said, this is what I want to run, or so, but there's trust there. There's trust with his ability and trust in our relationship.
Was Bo kind of part of the calculus?
No.
At all? Nothing?
No. It could have been Bill.
You give your coaches freedom, Sean. You give your coaches freedom on like defense, special team. How do you avoid micromanaging something you've been so good at?
I probably micromanage all those areas. So it's not any one person's defense or special teams. It's the Broncos. And so there's some freedom, and yet you guys just haven't been in enough meetings.
With that off your coach, you said that Davis has that gift to play. How do you know that?
I think he does. Well, I think he's sharp, and I think he's been around it. He's coach's kid, played quarterback, and then in the preseason, it was really good. So yeah, and again, I think that I want to do everything I can to support him. So we're not going to sit and grade his play calling each week. At least, hopefully, we're not. But I think it's more about the team.
With the play calling off the plate on game days, what are you anticipating?
I'm still going to call some plays on game days.
What are you anticipating, though, that maybe you can focus on that maybe you couldn't focus on before?
Well, I don't know. I think that, like I said, sometimes you feel like your hand's empty because you're used to doing it, for 20-some years. But I think overall it'll slow down a little bit. You'll see more of the game. But I know that there's a lot of prior to the game prep when you're calling one side of the ball or the other. And so I know there's philosophy. Some people believe in order to I think all methods work. All right, historically speaking, all methods work. Right? You can be. It was our first defensive play caller to win a Super Bowl. Did a great job. We've had offensive, and so I don't look at it that way as much as just it's always looking at your own resources.
Sean, maybe there was a communication situation, but Bo told us on
There was. Why don't you ask Mike? No, I'm not going to answer the question about an injury. Right here.
situation.
Ask him. Ask Mike.
But
Next
Bo
question.
knows, okay.
Next question.
Both Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick, there's been coaches obviously that haven't called plays that are greats of all time. Do you pick those guys' brains about how they? I mean, you obviously know a lot about it.
No, I think it's what pertains to us. I think it's what fits us, and obviously I spent a lot of time talking with Bill Parcells. I don't even know if we've talked about this. I think he would always be he'd say, why are you doing that? I don't care if I was doing the opposite. He would always challenge kind of your thought in a good way.
As it pertains to the draft, what have been your observations about being the
Say it again.
NIL era players? What's been different about that?
I think it helps us. Someone asked me that the other day. I think it helps for us. It helps us reveal, maybe make up character, behavior to some degree. You can see the journey that some players take, and I'm look in a lot of ways very positive change with one school, and then there are always these players that refuse to leave and stay at there's less small school players though getting drafted, and it's not a crisis. It's just that they're getting moved to 1A schools, right? And I don't think it's hindered us though in the draft. I think it's very, very commonly you'll list the schools, first school, second school, maybe junior college, first school, second school. And so that note section on a player's profile has gotten longer with most of these guys, but it hasn't I don't think hindered us or hurt us in any way. It's actually kind of helped us. I don't know that that's the case. I think it's just you've gotten really good exposure from more than one staff, possibly, and you've got a chance to see someone's story maybe written out in a positive way, sometimes not in a positive way.
Besides Davis, why did you decide to give up play calling?
Because of Davis, there's no. It just felt like he was going to do a good job with it. Felt like he's talented.
Sean, just so we're clarifying, with Bo, when you said predisposed, is that was referring to?
I'm not going to get into the injury. What I meant predisposed is there was a slight that was he's not, and there weren't multiple. So I have a problem, and Mike, I apologize. I have a problem when someone's quoting me to him on a conference call and they're inaccurate and they're one of our locals that shouldn't be. All right, next question.
When you said after the season you were going to talk to Zach about the running game, have you got any
Sure.
headway on that? And do you need to add a back? I know you got like Harvey, but you.
Well, if we look at our roster and we start doing the muss, you would say you have to take the free agents out of the equation, and so running back would have to be one. Linebacker, there's two of them. So when we go through that exercise, I think you have to remove the magnets so I would say when you do that, you look at the roster differently, you look at tight end differently, so those are positions certainly that would stand out.
Were you surprised that Vance Joseph didn't get the head coaching
Go ahead.
position?
Sean, when you were in Rollins and now what goes into that whole line?
I think it's one of the most important positions on your team because it can kind of permeate your building. I think it starts with selecting what you're looking for, what your profile is for a starter, sometimes developmental player. There's certain things that are just ingrained in my head what a developmental offensive lineman has to be. And I think that was one of our first missions 3 years ago coming here is to try to get that room right. And I think one of the reasons it permeates your team is that if they're good, your defensive line quickly has to catch up. And so historically speaking, for me, we've always invested maybe early draft capital for that position. It's hard to find those guys and the defensive linemen in free agency this time of the year. There are certain positions that are abundant, but that's one that's tough.
As you look to free agency, in retrospect, how important was it to get some of those extensions done before the season and during the season so that?
Yeah, I think, look, and it's a busy year. George did a great job with some of those extensions. Excuse me. But I think that the thing that changes when you go 3 extra weeks in your calendar, everything happens quicker. But we'll be working hard on addressing these areas. The first step obviously is free agency with our own players, other players, and then the draft.
Sean, you mentioned linebacker. Did you guys feel like you were good enough at that position?
I mentioned linebacker without getting into. I'm not going to have a review on each position because there's 2 of them that are free agents that were on our roster.
Were you surprised?
For a long time.
Yeah.
2014. What is about his sort of path makes him ready for
He's played the position. He's sharp. It was an easy transition for him, like immediate. And so when it can come from within the building, it's really good. And in our case, it was easy to see that. I couldn't remember the year you did, but I remember having him. Yeah. But he's done a good job.
Sean, We
were on a roll. I can't recall. I remember Declan coming in from Iowa, Joe Brady coming in. These guys who cover us in Denver, each year we talk about guys getting these opportunities, and it's a good problem. You want to see them have success. Declan was extremely detailed. So he was a quality control coach for us. I remember just taking all the steps. It's hard to get to this position. There's a journey everyone has, and so there's no shortcuts. But he took the journey the right way. Then when I got hired 3 years ago, I had a job here as tight ends coach. I know he interviewed for that position at New Orleans, but so we were fortunate to get him here. And then, man, in a blink of an eye, we lost him. And now Chicago lost him, and it's Baltimore's benefit. He's a tremendous football coach. He's bright. Again, I was saying earlier, it's never on your time clock. The time clock for these young coaches that are good is quicker than you might think. And so I'm excited for him because – yeah, absolutely. And that'll be quicker than Baltimore wants.
What kind of problems do you think NFL offenses are trying to solve?
Problems NFL offenses are trying to solve now. Look, it still gets back to pass protection, the time you get relative to working on that. We're going to play our players in the preseason games, not the entire game, but it's important in their development. So I would say the pressure players on defense are, fantastic at that. And then it's handling, I would say, pass protection and the looks you get, the different looks pressure-wise. I mean, that's what keeps you up late on Wednesday nights, the third down plan.
What kind of coaches are the Bills getting in Pete Carmichael and Jim Leonard?
Start with Jim Leonard. I think, first off, he's played 10 or 11 years. I can recall competing against him when he was with the Jets, a number of teams. Real sharp. I think a good leader. He's got a personality about him that I think is really good. I think Pete, I've been with the longest. 19 years maybe. He's got a great presence. I know Joe has a high trust level in him because Joe sat in those meetings with us all those years. Again, I struggle with the years when they all came and went, but Joe, Pete, Declan, keep going with all these guys. I think Pete will keep that room moving. This is the challenge, for Joe or myself. Keep the room moving while you're not in the room. Sometimes you can't be. And I think Pete is really sharp that way. So, two good coaches.
What about Joe Brady that you saw maybe young in his career?
Yeah, he came, again, I can't recall the first year. I just know he was part of that Rat Pack. Had a lot of good ideas, a lot of RPO ideas. He came from the college game, and we just hit on a bunch of, we were finding the right guys. And I think we've done the same in Denver with some of our young coaches. So the clock, we can't control. For Joe, it was that opportunity to go coach Burrow, Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and that was an unreal season. They won the national championship his first year. He ended up at Carolina, and I just saw him in the hallway coming here. I'm excited for him. He still seems super young. He'll always seem that way to me, but he was fantastic, and he worked hard to get where he's at.
Sean,
Sean,
were you
as someone who's played quarterback and coached quarterbacks for a long time, what is your relationship like with the private quarterback coaches who work with today's NFL quarterbacks and have worked with them for
The
years?
workout quarterbacks,
Yeah.
coaches,
Yeah,
I'm good. No, I'll tell you a funny story. My first year in the league was 1997 with the Philadelphia Eagles. And the first week I was in, John Gruden sent me to Phoenix to work out a quarterback by the name of Jake Plummer. He was a first-round pick, and it was his pro day. And I remember we all sat around, the scouts, and this was his pro day. And they said, Coach, are you going to put him through I was the only quarterback coach there. And so I put him through 87 throws. This was his pro day. There wasn't script, there wasn't music or uniforms. And obviously a lot's changed. I love that these opportunities for these private coaches exist. A lot had to do with the 2011 collective bargaining agreement when all of a sudden facilities weren't open as long. Once they come to us, then they're with us. And so I'm comfortable if you have a swing coach, but on your own time.
Were you surprised that Vance Joseph didn't get a head coaching position, and what does it mean that he's back to the continuity?
I love that he's back. I am a little surprised with the season we had, as well as we played defensively, and with 10 openings. And so he and I get a chance to talk about that kind of stuff as the season was worn down. And I know he felt like he had a handful of interviews that were productive and which he felt were really good opportunities. I know that when that opportunity comes for him, he'll be successful. He's got a presence about him, and you guys have been around him. That's just, I think, one of his superpowers is his calming presence, and he pulls the best out of his players that play for him. So it's hard to tell. There's 32 of these teams that are owned individually, and everyone's different, and yet a lot of them have trouble getting out of their own way.
Sean, contract here for George. Would you advocate for him to be?
I have already, yeah. So, it's overdue. I say that respectfully to the process, but he and I have a great working relationship, and so my job wouldn't be as fun or as exciting if he wasn't a part of it. But that should be something that gets handled quickly.
Last year it was Joker at this time is the piece you really wanted.
Every year. We're always looking for the tight end or running back that have those traits. They're hard to find, though.
Is there another must-have, would you say?
Yeah.
For your offense?
Look, I would say this. It's the same every year. You know, you want to make sure you're looking closely at your offensive line. I mentioned the running back position. I'm not going to get into detail with what we're looking to do basically in the offseason with these positions. We're always trying to improve our team. We've invested and we've seen good growth at receiver with the guys we've drafted. 3 of these guys, Troy, Marvin, as well as Pat. So we'll keep going.
I don't know if we got a chance to ask at the end of the year, but Bo, from his development, that standpoint,
He's doing good.
where did you see him take the biggest steps in year 2?
I think there's a confidence. I mean, man, his play in the fourth quarter from behind, obviously we won 13 or so many games. You have that much more film, available to see what he's done in 2 years. And I love the fact that he doesn't take sacks. He's a real good athlete. And one of the things, I was talking about this earlier, this NFL bus this time of the year, you don't know who's driving it, right? And it's important to pay attention to it, but not to get on it, right? Because some of the mocks and all those, it's someone's job to do, but and you really have to tune out some of that white noise. And if you don't, you get stuck with a player you're not happy with. And I think we say this all the time. I just read where 2018, they were drawing some award for a draft class, one of my last years in New Orleans. I always say 3 years down the road, let's look at a draft class. And that was I think the Lattimore Camara. 3 years down the road, let's look at a draft class. And I think so many times teams get into trying to win that day. And I think you can make a lot of mistakes that way.
Sean, in that vein, because you talked about it, do you have a minimum threshold for college starts?
I've heard, listen, Bill's even talked about it. There's certain things we won't budge off of. I don't like a 7-game starter. That's going to have to look like it walks on water. You with me? That's going to have to be like, so I don't like that. There's certain prototypes with the position, hand size, and those are important. I hear people say, why? Because historically speaking, if someone tells me in 30 years there's only been 2, then I've got to pay attention to those numbers. But fortunately, I haven't had to look at it that often and then have to make that decision that often when it comes to like how much playing time. And I think we were the benefactors of someone who's played a lot, and so there was a lot of that evidence on tape. But I'm sure historically speaking, like we would always ask these questions. There was a running back last year that fumbled a bunch I kind of liked. And I was like, all right, give me the numbers in the last 25 years, runners who fumbled a lot and then came into our league and it was corrected. And there's quite a few of them. But at quarterback, there aren't many that were sacked a lot where that got cleaned up. So there's certain things that are just bigger alerts. 25. Who uses that? Yeah, so, yeah, and I've never, and again, partly because I haven't been in that position maybe where I'm taking that, but I would understand where you'd want a larger body of work, or else I want to know who was playing ahead of him and have an interest in drafting those guys.
Sean, can you speak to what it means
For Drew, listen, I'm super excited for him and his family. You're talking about Breeze, and I saw him probably 2 weekends ago. He was back there for Mardi Gras. That was a big deal. And to be part of that with somebody was emotional, and he just represented all the things that was so good relative to his play. I mean, he truly, and we've seen this with other athletes, but he truly like brought the best out of all of us, coaches. I mean, his work ethic was something. So that was pretty cool to get that call. Like he'd sat on it for 3 weeks, I think. His wife planned the surprise with him, and then I was just and the idea that he went in with Kuechly, you know, those two had this cat and mouse game going on forever, so their busts will be next to each other. That was pretty cool.
Sean, what competition committee has said that they would continue to monitor the health and safety risks associated with the sneak after this past season?
I don't think the push sneak. Look, I think if that ever goes away, it's not a health and safety thing, right? We discussed that last year for 2 hours, and we just adopted 1,000 more kick returns. Which play do you think is more of a health risk? 1,000 more kick returns. So I think if we choose to ever move on from that, it won't be because of health and safety. It will just be like we don't like it, which is okay.
So what led you back to the competition committee? Like you served on it, then you did.
I like the pain. I like our league. I like talking about stuff like that. Like when I bring up that, we literally spent 2 hours on the health and safety of a QB sneak. And that same, like literally a half an hour prior, we passed a rule that allowed over 1,000 more kicks. So every once in a while your BS meter goes up. I'm passionate about the game and being involved in it.
How different is it to be back now with some new faces and first time?
I think it'll be very similar.
How do you feel about face masks and maybe other like personal fouls or safety-related fouls becoming reviewable?
You know, I'm going to be honest because I haven't sat in on these early meetings because I literally have been like in that bed with chicken noodle soup. So I don't want to. It appears like they want to be able to get some obvious stuff corrected, you know, like a punch thrown but I'm anxious to see what it is. But it appears like it's more of player discipline, and so we'll see.
Maybe throw a flag from up top when there's like an obvious one, maybe?
Yeah, is that your idea, or are you quoting it?
No, it's a suggestion, but you just seem like the right person to ask about that.
Yeah, I'm not a good hypothetical question answer guy, though. These guys would tell you that.
Sean, just in general, offseason progression, how close you guys got? Are you more of the mindset that, man, big swing, offseason puts us over the edge, or just stay?
I think, that's a great question. I think a little bit of both. You do have to know that you really got to go back, and it's painful, but you got to start from the beginning. You really do. From my lens, we won a lot of games by one score or less, right? And I'm not naive enough to think those games couldn't have swung. And you could grab any 2 or 3, but where's the meat on the bone? The meat on the bone exists with our takeaways. That has to improve. Our run game consistency, our meat on the bone relative to a number of things that we won despite maybe not being as good as others. And I think that's the only way to look at it relative to this team, writing its own chapter and getting us to where we want to go, which is obviously a game and a half further than where we went.
Did you learn something about Marvin in the playoffs in terms of what possibilities are?
I would say we've progressively, as you watch, and there's that balance of snaps, but he's been showing us that, right? I mean, and I would sometimes say, look, man, the only one keeping him back sometimes would be just the rotation. But, Troy's done well in his second year. But I go all the way back to that Cincinnati Monday night game or Saturday. What night did we play? The Saturday night game. And we got to see a real special performance. And so we got to keep finding him those opportunities down the field. The right balance, of course.
Would you anticipate an offensive coordinator, play caller, being more aggressive than a head coach, play caller?
No, he would be what the head coach wants relative to each game going in.
Sean Payton said yesterday that there were 5 plays that they kind of wanted back from replay assist.
I saw something. Ours wasn't one of them, though.
No, but he said 4 of
He liked ours.
He said 4 of the 5 were in the 1 o'clock window, and there's obviously
Yeah, I don't like hearing that, right?
Yeah, what do you think of?
Well, I want to play in the 4 o'clock window, and I'm glad I'm in Denver. I think that's number one. We should never have a work shortage in replay, and I think that those are the things we'll try to clean up and correct. As far as people and just finding out, Yeah, when I saw that, I was a little surprised. All right, one more question. He is? Yeah, I do. I say that respectfully, and I think that I know there was a lot of off-season talk. There always is those discussions, which are healthy discussions with players or people. Are they Hall of Fame worthy? I just saw him for so long. It would be the Tony Gwynn example of just consistency over a long period of time, and that there's something to be said for that. Extremely smart, and those guys are always difficult because they see all of your flaws if you're not paying attention to them. Your self-scout, and so that was what was hard with Kuechly. We would spend hours trying to see what he was seeing, and because there was nothing worse when someone like that would call a play out at the NFL level, and you're like, how did they get that? And so I wish him well, whatever he decides, but he's something. All right, thank you.